Hello and welcome to the Nick Lugo Show. Today you're going to experience Sam Thiara, a wise man disguised as an ordinary one. He is, full of a tremendous amount of knowledge. He's full of a tremendous amount of experience, and he's made his way throughout his entire life, living an authentic life, living as a spontaneous person, and going on these tremendous journeys, doing these tremendous things. And he's here to share some wisdom today. He's here to share some wisdom about who we can become and how we can develop our identity. I noticed that in my life, I've spent it so hyper-focused on being a specific thing, going a specific place, going into a specific career. And, it was futile. It was futile. It doesn't lead to happiness. Just literally picking a goal and striving for it, picking a dollar amount and just going for it. And, he tells me how to find myself. He explains to all of us how we could be who we are and to live an authentic life. So without further ado, Sam Thiara. So how did you exactly get into organizational psychology?
Actually, it's interesting because, I graduated from the same university years ago. And then as I was, had no idea what I was going to do, but then went down a pathway, and the realization was it wasn't even the right pathway. And then eventually wound up at the university because of the bumps and stumbles I had along the way in life and career, and said, I really need to be back to support the students, to get them so that they don't go through what I went through. And I remember the associate deans, because I shared with her these letters I received. And again, I'm not sure what the format of this will be or if we've even started. But ultimately, for 8 years, I did all the student engagement part. In other words, I was told students are coming to school and going home, but they're not engaged. And my thing is, academics only get you so far. Okay, we need to build in the engagement component, because employers are saying, what can you do? And how are you able to interact, engage with others? So it's not just about GPAs and transcripts. It's also about building your personal brand. And that goes to the marketing piece. So while I was doing the student engagement, and we shifted an entire culture to engagement, where students are now coming to school because they know that there are things that they can do that's going to really elevate and help them in their journey. But now, then my associate dean came up and said, we should get you into teaching. So I teach introduction to business as well as an organizational behavior course, because that's where I've really thrived, is interacting, engaging, leadership, communication skills, teamwork, perceptions, and all of these things. And it just naturally made sense.
Yeah, I think that's the best part about you. And of course, I've done a great amount of research on you and figured out, so much. And the best thing that I have taken from your story is your story. Your story is just absolutely incredible. So actually start right there. Start when you were in college and you went down the wrong path, and tell everybody where you went.
Yeah. I graduated from Simon Fraser University with a degree in business and political science. And Nick, it's more like, okay, who's lucky to get me? And you walk across the stage. And when I walked across the stage, it felt like a giant virtual door slammed behind me, and there was no handle. Everything familiar to me was behind that door. And I wound up sitting down and I said, okay, now I got to start looking for work, but okay, what am I going to look for? So I started thinking about companies. Now, back then you actually had to write letters or type letters and hand deliver them or pop it in the mail. There was no internet. There was no email. And I remember saying, okay. And when I got home, in a short period of time, I typed up 12 letters, submitted my resume, and I sent it off to 12 companies and waited. I said, okay, who's lucky to get me? Well, about 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. And the letter was from one of the companies. I opened it up and it said, sorry, we don't have a job for you. Good luck.
Yeah.
I was like, you know what? That's okay. You're not lucky to get me. I've got 11 letters out there. I'm going to send 3 more out.
For what field? Sorry? What field were you in?
Actually, it was in business, just in business in general. Like, it could be an entry-level position in a bank. It could be, entry-level management consulting, entry-level government work, just something that was more entry-level, but not really specific. It was just more like, well, that sounds interesting. Or, okay, I saw this position. They're looking for a entry-level HR person. Okay, that sounds interesting. And next thing you know, these letters started coming back. And it was like the tide. The more letters I sent out, the more letters came back. And I don't know why I did it, but I kept all my letters. That's, 86 rejection letters, like literally the size of a brick, these rejection letters.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting because every single letter eventually became a nail in my coffin of self-confidence, because I was like, it's not a matter of who's lucky to get me. It's like, am I lucky to get a job? But then, I was persistent and I kept sending letters out and saying, okay, there's got to be something. But I wound up getting my first job. Okay. It's an entry-level government job. And I was like, so thrilled. Finally, somebody has gambled on me and I got something. Well, my first job was being a janitor in a hospital, emptying rubbish bins and mopping floors. Wow. But it's a government union or a unionized place through the government. So it was government work. But Nick, I went into that job with this attitude of like, okay, I'm not going to say anything negative about it, but let me go into this. And as a result of this, 3 valuable life lessons emerged. The first lesson that carries me to who I am today is my father said, I don't care what you do, you make sure you do the best job possible because your reputation is on the line. Yeah. Whether you're a janitor, car salesman, bank, doesn't matter. Even if you're the president of, a bank, doesn't matter. You do the best you can. And I put my heart and soul into that being a janitor job. And there was no floor cleaner than at the end of my shift and no rubbish bin left full. Second valuable lesson. There were times, not always, but there were times I would get on an elevator with nurses, doctors, and administrators, and they'd be talking, but I would be ignored because you're a janitor. We have nothing in common to you, and we are professionals. I know what that feels like. I am never going to treat people like that. It doesn't matter who you are. I will always carve out time for individuals because they all have a story to share. And the third valuable lesson, instead of going into this with a negative attitude of, this is not what I signed up for, and looking at it from a problem perspective, instead I said, I need to learn. And I learned that there's experiences that you gain in everything that we do. So I always say, if I can pick 3 valuable life lessons out of being a janitor in a hospital with a degree on the wall, what are you missing? Like as in the journey, as in the things that you're doing. You may look at it from a negative standpoint because it's not positive. But what are you picking up? But the important thing is now, and as my journey went forward, I still had bumps and things along the road because then I was able to get a job in retail. It was me. I could do it, but it wasn't me. And I was there for a year. Then I got a job working in a crown corporation, so government corporation. You know what? I could do it. It's not me. And then a job emerged that really lined up. And that's where I think the shift happened, because I started thinking about not what I want to do, but instead I started focusing on who am I? Because once I focused on that shift, clarity emerged and it really told me what I needed to do. Well, and then I wound up leaving the corporate job, and everybody told me you're making the biggest mistake of your life because, great wages, great benefits, pension, government work, stability. You love your job now because you're in a specific area. And if you leave, you don't have a job.
Yeah.
But 2 words, comfort and uncertainty. Comfort. We strive towards this thing called comfort. The Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 job. I can pay the mortgage. I can do this. The problem with comfort is you stop growing as an individual. I stopped growing. And the other word was uncertainty, because this was a buyout. Like, in other words, they did a voluntary separation package. They needed 850 people out of 6,000 to leave. So there's uncertainty if I leave because I don't have a job. But there's also uncertainty if I stay, because with that many people leaving, you can put me where you want. And I'm not comfortable with that. With uncertainty, I control uncertainty. No one else does. So I walked to the edge of the cliff into the darkness, and I took a leap and I jumped. And 2.5 months later, despite what people had thought that I was making the biggest mistake of your life, because not one person supported me in my decision. I wound up working on the Olympic bid to get the games to Vancouver and worked on the most amazing project, that Vancouver was able to host the Winter Olympics in 2010. Well, prior to that, I was able to work on the bid to get it. A small team of people of us, we got the games to Vancouver. And then I transitioned into the university because the whole idea behind it was, if I've had these experiences, I've never looked at them as negatives. I need to share this so that young individuals, 15 to 40-year-olds, don't go through what I went through. I mean, I still think you need to encounter. And as a result of this, one of my quotes that I live by, obstacles are the necessary bricks on a road to success. Do not fear the obstacles, embrace them. And I really feel people need to encounter obstacles because it's going to build the resilience. But how are you going to focus on the obstacles? And I leave you with this, Nick, on this topic is these letters. Mm-hmm. Do you realize that if one of those letters would have materialized, today I would not be here talking to you. My life would have gone in a different direction. I embrace those rejections. And the second part I look at is many of these companies no longer exist. I still do. I outlasted these companies, and people are going to be resilient, and you just have to go in, find the way, because you're shifting from what you're going to do to who you are. Find the champions and enablers, the people who are there to support you. Learn from your experiences and don't fear the obstacles.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love that. It's something, like you're sort of answering and also questioning a lot of the internal debates that I've experienced throughout my life. And the first one that I wanted to talk about and sort of break down exactly what you said, like that was wonderful, was financial security, right? When we look at something like financial security, is it an obstacle or is it a goal? Because I always see financial security, and many people see it as, I remember my friend was talking about his interviews and how he was going to get this job and all this stuff. And, he wanted people to sort of feel happy about it and be into it and be like, yeah, that's awesome. I laughed in his face. Yeah. And and I did it intentionally, obviously, to give him a little bit of like a kick in the ass. But it was like, how futile is your goal? Your goal is just meant to give you some financial security, this small window of life that really is not correlated to happiness. So how do you see financial security clearly after all your experiences?
I mean, I'm not going to mislead people and say, just throw that aside and everything's going to be fine. And no, that's not even, I mean, that doesn't provide anything to everyone or anybody. What I always say is, when you realize who you are as an individual, I mean, you're going to have to go the pathway of practicality for a while. Mm-hmm. But if you go in with this idea and attitude of, who am I and what resonates and what am I not willing to compromise, eventually you're going to be able to transition into a role where the financial aspects are going to emerge because you're being authentic in the journey. But like I said in the beginning, and I wrote a blog post, it was called Had to Do, Have to Do, Want to Do. Mm-hmm. The first job out of post-secondary or high school, if you decide not to go to post-secondary, is had to do. Corporate culture, pay, benefits, none of this matters. I need a job. Then eventually, 5 years later, what do I have to do to get to my want to do? And the want to do is this idea that's really what you're meant to do. But you have to do some heavy lifting with regards to self-reflection, and don't let the environment dictate. Don't let people dictate. Don't let the noise dictate, because you have to make a decision on the direction you want to go. And I always say that, in my class, when I teach organizational behavior, I tell students, because we talk about motivation, and I asked them, I said, what are you motivated by? And of course, the very first thing everyone says is money. So, okay, right. I said, okay, And then they say other things, and somewhere it's, meaningful work, making a difference somewhere down the bottom. And I said, okay, money is your motivator. And then, who thinks money is your motivator? And all these hands go up. I said, okay, what if we visualize this? What if I take you out of this class and I put you into the sewers and you're going to shovel crap for the rest of your life, but I'm going to pay you really well? And they said, okay, well, what's really well? I said, let's say $100,000 starting salary right now, but you're going to be doing this. And they're like, well, that's not realistic. No. And I said, okay, but what's realistic? And then they'll respond back with, $1 billion. And I'm like, no, come on, that's not realistic. But $100,000 where your starting salary out of university might be 30,000, maybe 40,000. I'm going to start you off at 100,000 because money is your motivator. Would you do it? And they're like, well, I'll do it for a little while until something better comes. I said, no, you don't understand. I'm going to start with 100,000 and then you're going to get incremental pay. But for 30 years, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, this is what you're going to do. Would you do it? And they're like, well, no, of course not. I said, so let's put that aside. Money is not your motivator. Money is a result of your motivation. Because once you start pursuing what really is authentic to you, the realization is people are going to come to you. Nick, think of it this way. Let's say there's a corner store, and let's say there's Starbucks. And let's say it's a beautiful sunny day today. You want to go buy a pair of flip-flops. The corner store, they sell food, coffee, lottery tickets, hardware, ATM, fried chicken. They sell a whole bunch of different things. Would you go to Starbucks to buy a pair of flip-flops?
I don't think they sell flip-flops.
Don't think, or they don't?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I don't think they don't. Yeah.
So they don't, because they sell coffee, tea, and food-related items, right?
Yeah.
You may go into the corner store because maybe they got flip-flops. So the idea is people think, yeah, but isn't it better to be the corner store because you offer so many things to so many people? True. But many companies, what they want is to go directly to the person who's specialized. They want to go to the person who exactly knows who they or what they are and who they are. So if I need tea, coffee, or whatever, I'll go to Starbucks or any of those other types of businesses because you know exactly what you're going to get. And that's where, from an opportunity standpoint, people come to you. And there's a practical exercise that I give to not just young people, but it's even senior people on this journey called the 5 core elements. And I'm happy to share what that is.
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
Okay. So the moment I started focusing on who I am versus what I'm going to do, clarity emerged. Think of it this way. If you want to build a house, you need a solid foundation, correct?
Yeah.
We pay people to ensure that the solid foundation is there for the house. When have we looked at building a solid foundation for our life? And the way that I say we do this is I call it the 5 core elements. What are the 5 things that you are not willing to compromise in life and career? Not just career, life and career. And the reason I say you're not willing to compromise is the 5 things that are really important to you. So for me, servant leadership, story sharing, activator igniter, champion enabler, community do-gooder. Those are 5 things that provide so much clarity to me that I know what opportunities I will undertake. I think what happens is people do it the other way around. They put the cart before the horse. They start looking for work. Well, does this, I like the job, don't like the job, but I'm in the job and whatnot. What I'm saying is do your homework now. Find the things that resonate, that you're not willing to compromise. So now you have something to balance opportunities against. Now, to be fair, Nick, maybe in the beginning, you only hit 2 out of 5. Yeah. But you already know what you're missing. And can it be incorporated in the job? Or eventually, do I need to find another job? Or how do I satisfy 3 out of 5, 4 out of 5? the way that I share with people on how you find these 5 core elements is look at the classes that you're doing. Which ones do you really like and which ones do you not like? But ask yourself why. If you've had any jobs in the past, what jobs did you have? What did you like about the jobs? What did you not like? And why? What do you like to do in your spare time or social time? Why? And from that, you start pulling words out that matter. So, for example, oftentimes I'll talk to people and I'll be like, tell me something you're not willing to compromise. And they're like, Sam, family is so important to me. And I said, okay, why is family important? And as they start talking, the words I might pull are relationships and connectedness. It brings them relationships and connectedness to not just their family, but extended family. And I said, but does that connectedness also apply to the work environment? Oh, absolutely. Does this also apply to, your school? And they're like, oh yeah, of course. That's important. The relationships and connectedness.
Yeah.
So I said, maybe one of the things that's really important to you is relationships and connectedness, and family is one component. And they're like, oh yeah. What people are fearful for is I'm making you pick 5 things. Mm-hmm. But Nick, here's the thing. You can change them anytime in your life. As you have more experiences, you're like, yeah, this doesn't really fit anymore. I'm going to replace it with this. But it really is about self-reflection, introspection. But Nick, I think, as you mentioned, marketing is your background. This is you building your personal brand.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing that kind of, just sort of putting it together. I think it's really interesting to see, like, and this is like my motto in college. And this was somebody told me. Mm-hmm. It just sort of resonated with me, is that the first part of going to college is to figure out who you are, and then you have to figure out what you do. And you're right. So many people put the cart before the horse, and they just say, okay, you know what? I'm going to figure out what I do, and then sort of mold my personality and my identity based off that. And you see that a lot with, I'm friends with a lot of people who are going to be Wall Street bankers and finance people and accountants and all of these things. But in reality, it's, mm-hmm. It's so difficult. And here's one of the things that you really hit the nail on. And I just wanted to, sort of hit this. Most people don't know who they are, yet they think they know who they are. Yep. It's like, how do you not know? It's so simple, right? It's like, how do you not know who you are if you're you? Like, Of course, like, you could go to this fallacy of, okay, yes, I know exactly who I am. I'm Nick Lugo. I'm standing here and I know exactly what motivates me and drives me and all these things. But study after study proves this. And really just basic understanding of human ignorance is that the deeper we go, the further we understand ourselves. And then we look back on ourselves a year later and say, wow, how dumb was I? How stupid was I? How little did I know about myself? And it really seems like we don't take a step back and understand our values, understand exactly what we want. So this really seems to be what your core elements are about, just understanding your values, understanding exactly what drives you.
No, totally, Nick. And it's also like, funny enough, being an educator in university was never a goal of mine. Being an author was never a goal of mine. To be a public speaker was never a goal of mine. So oftentimes in my class, I shared this aspect called, goals versus intentions. Mm-hmm. So for me, goals don't work. It doesn't mean if you have goals, you're wrong. I'm just saying goals for me don't work.
I agree.
Goals are very linear. So you're laying down a foundation of goals to say in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, this is what I want to do. If you don't know who you are, how are you able to set these goals? And if an opportunity emerges, somebody sees some talent in Nick and says, oh, Nick, I've got an opportunity for you, but you're like, wait, it's not a part of my goal. Do you give up the goal or the opportunity? If you give up the goal, how important was that goal in the first place? If you give up the opportunity, what did I just give up that may have opened and unlocked an amazing door? Instead, when an opportunity emerges, I compare it to those 5 things to say, does it hit 5 out of 5? And if it hits 5 out of 5, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to do this. I mean, I've got 12 projects I'm working on. They're not distinct, separated by boundaries and barriers, they actually layer into each other. So being a writer layers into my storytelling, which layers into my speaking, which layers into my teaching, and speaking on podcasts. All of these things, they're separate, but it's clumped. The one thing that I do in my class in week 2, and we revisit it in week 11. In week 2, I make every single student write a personal statement. In other words, tell me who you are, but I don't want this as a running resume. I don't want you to say, my name is Sam Thiara. I'm an educator at Simon Fraser University. I'm this, I'm this, I'm this. No. I want you to write it in a format that if Nick and I met for the first time, how is Nick going to introduce himself to me in an interesting way? So let me share an example.
Yeah.
So Nick, if you were in the beginning of this podcast to say, Sam, so tell our audience who you are. Here's what my personal statement is. There are 5 things that guide and direct me in life: servant leadership, story sharing, activator igniter, champion enabler, and community do-gooder. These 5 things have enabled me to help individuals, teams, organizations, educational institutions, and nonprofits to be their pinnacle best. But it's also made me into a speaker, storyteller, mentor, coach, author and a writer, entrepreneur, problem solver, and a community activator. I think that sounds more interesting than, I teach at the university, I do this, I do this, I do this. So I want students to fashion that and to hold on to it, not just leave it once. Yeah. As you go through experiences, you continually change it.
That's what it seems like. It seems like you're putting sort of your actions before your results. Yep. Right. It seems like you're putting, okay, what drives me? What motivates me? What is the thing that is coming from within me? And then you're putting, obviously, the results, achievements, accomplishments, profession, all of these things.
Everything else.
Yep. And I think it makes sense, because I see this on like people's Instagram bios all the time. And this is like, it makes sense. It really creates your identity. I see people, they say like, family man, businessman, servant, in that order or something like that. And the reason why they're saying that is because they're saying, well, these are my values. This is who I am. And this is really how I sort of see the world. And I kind of like that. I like the idea that people sort of, understand who they are and then they project that out into the world rather than the opposite.
And that's where a lot of these opportunities are coming to me because of, either they've heard me speak somewhere or, somebody said, oh, you got to go talk to this guy. And next thing you know, we're working on a project together or, any number of opportunities have emerged. And I do look back and I'm like, how did I even wind up here? Like, I know what the journey is. And those amazing projects and things that I've gotten to work on and the things I've gotten to do, it's like, like you sometimes sit there going like, I have to go retrace all these steps and how did this happen?
Well, it seems like you had, and this is very characteristic of people who've sort of followed their passion, is it takes a lot of leaps of faith. Yeah. So for example, to choose this idea, and you talked about this, and I wanted to bring us back to it. You said, I'm going to figure out who I am first, and then figure out what I want to do based off that. And just that basic idea is just, let's say a leap of faith, right? Because if you're not striving for a goal, if you don't have this, okay, I'm going to make 80,000 a year in Wall Street, whatever, then you're saying the money comes later, right? And when you say the money comes later, it's like, what if it doesn't come later, right? That's a huge leap of faith. And I called it the leap of faith in being authentic. That was the note that I took. And well, that's a problem, right? Well, I wouldn't say a problem, but at least that's why many people don't take this leap of faith, because who says that you're going to be able to make that money in the future?
Yeah, no, and it's fear that holds people back. But what anybody, and this is where I've mentored and coached about 5,000 people, and they sit down in front of me. It's easy for them to share their fears. They can share with me what the challenges are, but they never tell me what the opportunities are. they always miss the opportunities. Like, in other words, when I took that leap of faith from the corporate job, I didn't just blindly walk to the edge of the cliff and then say, okay, that's it. Let's see how this winds up. Yeah. Where does the story end? No. I had already done homework with regards to who I am, what are the strengths. But the thing that we forget is our experiences and people around us aren't going to let us fall. Because you've spent the time building these relationships and these experiences, you carry them with you. And that becomes your strength. That becomes your superpower. And, it was also a conversion because, again, oftentimes in society, we use the word passion. Mm-hmm. Find your passion and, things will be great. I say passion can't be sustained. Passion is an igniter that guides you to your purpose. But the purpose is where the magic happens. Because if you were only on passion, it's like being a Formula One race car. They can't go forever, right? Yeah. But what you need to do is, and I get it, like somebody who's just about to graduate university, and I'm always honest with them in that regard and say, you're not going to find a purpose in life till much later. But if I can speed up the process for you to realize what your purpose is, you now have a marker that's going to guide you where you need to go. So passion is an igniter to purpose, which is the flame. And the purpose is really where you need to be.
That just rang so many bells. Like, I'm not going to lie to you. Like, I'm sitting here and I'm saying, okay, you know what? When I say I'm going to go to the gym, for example, right? Mm-hmm. When I say I'm going to go to the gym, maybe the first 2 weeks, I'm going to be like, yeah, gym, awesome, wonderful. Like I'm doing squats and I'm saying, this is awesome. Like, look how much I can lift, all that. But by the time you get to 6 months in, 9 months in, a year, 2 years, 5 years, you're not doing it because you're not doing it because you have a passion for doing it. You're doing it because whatever, right? It's secure, it's stable.
There's a purpose.
Yeah. Like you feel wonderful going, and maybe the day doesn't feel as great if you just don't get these endorphins. You just don't get started on your day like that. And man, like that's wonderful. The same thing goes with many principles, right? Like I went to write a book. I'm sure you went to write a book, and you're like, wow, this is so wonderful. I get to write a book, and then the motivation dies, but the question is, what are you left with, right? And if you're left with a purpose, then you're going to move forward.
Well, and Nick, to that point about the book, I mean, that's exactly what happened. Because if I was to go just on passion, I want to be an author. You know what? You can pound out a book, in 30 days, and great, you're an author. But purpose is what drove me to write the book about my journey to India. Purpose. I knew what I wanted to say and why I wanted to say what I needed to in this book about, going to India to find my ancestral roots, but also to find myself. But that was the purpose. It's a beautiful story that just needs to be shared. It wasn't about passion. Couldn't have carried me to the end goal on this one. Yeah. Because writing a book it's a really difficult, arduous process where And the thing was, because I had that purpose in place, it wasn't a matter of if there was going to be a book. It was a matter of when is the book coming out? Because I always saw it as that. Because the idea is there's so many books that never make it to the final end because it starts on passion and it runs on passion. And, people eventually just fuel runs out.
Well, that's one of the things that I really struggle with when I was in high school, right? So let's call that about 4 years ago. So I'm 20, so 16, right? What I kept doing was I wanted to go to the gym more. I wrote a book, right? So part of my book writing was this same problem. I listened to these podcasts and these motivators and all of these YouTube videos of motivation, right? Motivation. And I keep every morning I'd wake up and I'd listen to a motivational video and do all of these things. And eventually it took 2-3 weeks for that to kind of fizzle out, right? Yeah. Like I can't get any more motivation out of myself to do it. It's just, it's almost a different gear. And that seems to be like the huge problem, like something like 95% of the people who put on weight, who lose weight, can't maintain that loss and get it back. Yeah. And the reason why is because it seems like two different systems, right? System of motivation. Let me just go out and get to the gym. Let me just go out and start this habit, and let me just go out and, lose weight, whatever. And then there's the, okay, now that I'm here, now that I'm on this journey, now that I'm on this, we'll say, now I'm climbing up this mountain. It's not as glorious as everyone.
And now it becomes perpetuity. For example, like in June of last year during COVID, we were going through a major renovation in our house. And I mean, you also never know where the igniter is, because our designer said, okay, and we'll put an IKEA table here. And, I looked at it going like, no, I don't want to put an IKEA table here. I'm going to make my table. So that's where the passion came. I want to make my own table. Now I'm making my entire garage has become a woodworking workshop. And it's now purpose, because now I'm making stuff mainly because that table ignited, and that was the passion, to this perpetuity of now I've got all these people asking me to make tables and bathtub caddies and charcuterie boards and things like that. But it enables me to keep on going, because it's like, man, this is my outlet. This allows me. And I highly recommend this for whether you're in university, the work environment. What is your outlet? Because when I'm in my garage in the wood shop, I have suddenly released and discharged all my projects, and I'm in the garage doing the woodworking. But that's where some of my best ideas come, because I freed my mind from my daily commitments. So it could be the gym, it could be yoga, it could be painting, it could be woodworking, it could be just going for a hike on a regular basis. But what is your outlet? Because that outlet provides you the freedom to explore, expand, and do things that really matter to you.
So let me tell you the sort of, I guess, problem that I think most people struggle with as well as I do, is something like pitching myself out of it, right? Getting out of this daily work grind and all of these things. And what I notice is that, as I go through my daily life and as I continue to keep working, I set priorities, right? Yep. So I set the priority. Let's say I work on multiple projects at a time. So let's say I'm doing podcasts. Let's say I'm doing book writing. Let's say I'm doing, what's my other thing? I have a meditation practice. So, and school, right? So I'm doing these 4 things, let's say. And the problem is that I put these 4 things, right? Because I have, let's not say a goal, because I agree, I don't really set goals, but I set intentions. I say, okay, I'm going to pursue these 4 projects, and I'm going to go hard, and I'm going to kill it, right? But then what I end up doing is something like my outlet, something like organization, something like my thing that takes me out of my everyday experience. It falls to the bottom of the priority list. And everybody experiences this in terms of the crazy phenomenon that we call sleep, right? Like everybody knows that they must sleep, but other things just kind of take priority. Other things just, they're like, oh, let me just work an extra hour and lose an extra hour of sleep, and what do you do to sort of, even though you have 12 projects that are ongoing, even though you have so much going on, what is the thing that motivates you to
oh no, totally. What I would say is I know what my priorities are. And I know, like, for example, tomorrow I have to do a lecture. So after this podcast, I have to just make sure all my lectures are set up and everything. I have to mark an assignment from one of my classes today. So those are my priorities. But the idea of the outlet is carving that 1 hour to say, well, actually, it could even be longer for me because of the woodworking, because again, my schedule is quite flexible. So that's the luxury I have, is the flexible schedule.
Yeah.
But even taking a little bit of time, 30 minutes to read, 30 minutes for yoga, 30 minutes, whatever is your jam, you do it for 30 minutes. And it enables you to just separate yourself from the commitment, and it helps you to strive towards, clearing that mind of the clutter that's happening. So while you're on the treadmill, for example, if working out is what you want to do, you're on the treadmill, you're still technically working. Like when I'm woodworking and I'm sanding for 2-3 hours, I'm just not, my mind isn't just in a cosmic space of emptiness. I'm thinking about, okay, so, the lectures are coming up, it's going to be on perceptions, what can I think about or do? I think when I did my first TEDx, Nick, it was on discover the extraordinary in the ordinary. In other words, I think sometimes our life is a routine. Our life is on autopilot, and we go through it. And things around us we just do because it's routine, but it's ordinary. But embedded in the ordinary are actually these tremendously extraordinary experiences. But it's not the epic stuff, it's the little things. Maybe it's, when you're walking to from your house to your school, maybe you just take a different route, and, maybe there's a creek there and you're like, I'm going to have to come back to this. Or, maybe you're at the gym and you're like, okay, I haven't tried that exercise. Let me try that one. And all of a sudden something happens. All of these are extraordinary. And what I did was I did my first TEDx speech on storytelling, which relates to the extraordinary and the ordinary and how you find it.
I watched it.
Oh yeah. It's about carpe. Carpe diem is seize the day, but carpe is how I discover the extraordinary and the ordinary. Carpe stands for curiosity, appreciation, reflection, perspective, experience. So I go through life with a very curious nature. Things stop me. That's curiosity. When something stops me, I appreciate it for more than what it is. And then I reflect and I add purpose and meaning to it. My perspectives help me to add significance to this whole experience, to make it extraordinary. An experience is where you capture it and catalog it as a story so it does not die an untimely death. Yeah. I'll give you an example of extraordinary in the ordinary. So I carry with me puzzle pieces. Okay. Nick, if I gave you one single piece of a jigsaw puzzle, what can you do with one piece? Not
Pretty
much.
Nothing. Yeah.
Okay. It's ordinary, but this is what we feel like. We feel like that single piece of a jigsaw puzzle. We don't know where we fit in. We don't know the bigger picture, but we feel like that single piece of a jigsaw puzzle. So if it's ordinary, right before your eyes, I'm going to transform it magically into extraordinary. Because again, it's all about perspectives. This is what we always envision and think about. I carry with me a black satchel, and this is where the magic happens, because people think, okay, this is what you're focused on? No, let's focus on this. Okay. If I give you a piece of my jigsaw puzzle, do you realize my puzzle will be permanently incomplete without you? Do you realize I can't finish it now? Do you realize how important you are to me? And do you know what's really interesting? I physically see a transformation on the person's face. I have just converted something ordinary into extraordinary. And I've given about 5,000 pieces in the world to remind people how important they are to me. And do you know what? People have taped it to their mirror and they've told me, it reminds me every morning someone told me how important I was or how important I am. It's traveled in backpacks around the world. It's in curio boxes. It's in wallets. And yesterday I spoke at an event, and the key organizer of the event said, you gave me one 5 years ago, Sam, it's still in my wallet. Mm-hmm. I've had people who have gone through very challenging, difficult times in their life. In the deepest, darkest moments, they said, I saw the puzzle piece and it reminded me I'm connected to you. And that helped me. It didn't get them out, but it helped them get out of their most difficult and dangerous times in their life.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the lessons that you take from that, and it's just like so obvious, but like it just needs to be said. It's just the purpose, the feeling of excitement, the feeling of this ordinary or extraordinary within the ordinary all comes from within, right? Totally. Like we create our extraordinary experiences, and maybe the world and us have a little, let's say, negotiation, we sort of work together to create an experience. But at the end of the day, we're the ones who have the extraordinary experience. We're the ones who interact with the world and create something extraordinary. So, for example, go for it.
I was just going to say the fact that it's what it is people are traveling on a train, but they're focused on the final destination as opposed to the journey.
Yeah.
The journey is the most important part because that's where that extraordinary out of the ordinary emerges and helps you to realize, am I even on the right train?
Yeah.
Well, let's get off on the next stop and let's get you on the proper train. But that's where it's interesting because we travel in our lives just on autopilot. And it's almost me. I'm the one who stops people, say, did you see that? And they were like, what? And I said, well, did you see this? And I show them something and they're like, oh, I never even thought of it that way before. Yeah. And really what I try to do is get people to open up a little bit more because their journey, even if you took a little bit of time to just look at things from a different lens and a different perspective, you never know what it and where it's going to lead you.
Well, you understand the problem, right?
Yeah.
The problem is that we are unfortunately hyper-focused, right? Like we set a goal, right? And this is what you meant by the train metaphor is we set a goal and we're solely focused on the destination, right? And we're so hyper-focused on whatever it is that we're doing. We want to, go to our job and, get to work and then do the work and just get it as much done as possible, as efficiently as possible, and then come back home and then watch TV. Like all of the things that we do are so hyper focused that, and unfortunately we miss all the things along the way. And well, I don't know what to do about that because we were asking that question in the beginning of this podcast, which was essentially, what do you do about the fact that people are pursuing these goals. People are pursuing these financial security and careers and all of these things. But at the same time, we don't actually discover what's within us, what's around us, and all of these, the world itself.
Well, and what I would say is it's really about self-reflection, introspection. And this is, again, where sometimes you have to stop the journey even temporarily. And start looking at who you are as an individual, what matters. And it's interesting because I've had people and conversations with individuals who they're like, oh my gosh, Sam, like what you speak, I did this 2-3 years ago. And it changed my life because again, it provided me a real focus on purpose of what I wanted. But I think really what happens, Nick, is we have to tell ourselves, and this is where sometimes a coach comes in handy because the coach is there to support that person, whether it's in sports or whether it's in life or career. That coach is there to ask the questions and they can actually help speed up the process so that the individual doesn't have to do it by themselves. Because my job and role, so with 5,000 conversations to date, Nick, people come to me, they see me as this monk. They see me as the guy who's got all the answers to life. And I'm going to, Nick's going to come to me and say, Sam, and tell me a little bit about Nick. And then I'll be like, Nick, my child, you will do this in life. And you're like, great. Thank you, Sam. Now I can go. And I'm going to pursue that. No, I'm the difficult monk. You come to me looking for the answers to life. No. My job and role is to ask Nick questions because the monk that you seek lies within you. And I have to help you realize your potential. And instead of focusing on the problems are there. Problems will exist, but how do we get you to your opportunities and your solution to that problem? So that's what my role and responsibility is as a coach for 15 to 40-year-olds. I've also done that for CEOs too. I mean, it's interesting because I've had CEOs or people that have been in the industry 25, 30 years going like, I don't even know if I'm in the right job now,
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing that blew my mind. I noticed that as I started working harder, right, as I started getting more and achieving more and working more, I strayed further from myself than actually getting closer, and that's the weirdest thing because we establish our society in terms of these hierarchies of, okay, financials, right? The CEO is the top dog. He's got everything figured out. But really underneath this matrix that we've constructed, there's another hierarchy. And the other hierarchy is the people who've actually figured out who the hell they are. And, maybe that's a better hierarchy. Obviously it's less visual, it's less tangible, but
yeah. And I mean, it's not gamification where you're going to different levels. Like it's not about ego for me. It's not about status. It's not about money, but I don't need to be a CEO. I mean, I really know where I am in life is where I'm meant to be. And it's going to guide me to even the things in life that I need to do further.
Yeah.
Am I successful? Well, what is success? I mean, to some, I'm not successful because I don't have that title of, CEO in a Fortune 500 company, or, maybe I'm not making seven figures, right? So that's one part, but success is also, fulfillment and purpose. It's all in the eyes of the beholder and what's important to you. And as you gear and drive towards your purpose, that will be success.
Well, that's one of the really interesting things that really just blows my mind. It's like you look at the people who run our society, for example, right? The CEOs, the politicians, all of these things. The people who are truly wise and the people who truly understand themselves would never go for any of those positions.
Because I've been asked to get into politics and I've said no.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? Because why would someone go into politics, right? Yeah. Someone goes into politics and, let's say, strives, puts in those 80, 90-hour weeks to network and grow their political whatever, right? They do that because they seek external validation, they seek people to like them, and they seek power, control, all of these things. And, it's very difficult for someone to go into politics and succeed with only the pure motivation of, I want to help my fellow citizens. Like that, you never see that pitch anywhere. No. And usually if someone's saying that, they're most likely lying. And
no, and I get people coming to me who say, "Oh, Sam, you know what? I want to be a leader. Can you help me become a leader?" And I'm like, "Why'd you come to me?" And they said, "Well, you're a leader." And I said, "Okay." And again, I'm the difficult monk. I said, "Okay, what makes me a leader?" And they use these beautiful words. And I'm like, "Okay, those are great. But none of those make me into a leader. There's only one thing that makes me a leader." And they lean forward because they think I'm just about to give them the secret sauce, the recipe. And so what is it? I said, it's followers. Leadership is not a place or position. Leadership is a lifestyle. And followers determine whether you are worthy of that title, not you, because it's not a position. And, and it's interesting because people are like, "Oh, how do I get more followers then?" And it's like, you really don't get this. I mean, It's who you are as an individual. And even in my class, what I teach, and even the textbook I use, I'm going to be talking to the author because we spend 95% of our time talking about leadership, whereas 95% of the people are followers. So, and followership is not blindly following like sheep. Followership is where you meaningfully contribute to the organization and the individual and support and help them. Without you as the follower, they are nothing. So, there are people who will see me as a leader, but there are equally people who will not see me as a leader. And it's not that it's about status. It's not about position. It's not about title. And that's why servant leadership is one of the first things that I shared with you on my 5 core elements. I roll up the sleeves. I look for problems and I don't dwell on the problems. I look for solutions. Even if it's me, myself, having to roll up my sleeves and do what needs to be done to get it done, I'm going to do it. But that's not to win accolades. It's not to win titles or praise from people. I just can't sit back and watch things. I will never, and I've told myself, I will never be a bystander in life.
Interesting. I mean, one of the things that I worry about, and this is the problem of, let's say, Western society is that we find ourselves burnt out, right? So a lot of people, we work very hard. It seems like you've worked very hard. I work very hard, and we find ourselves burned out, right? Like if you're saying I have a responsibility, because that's essentially what you're saying. I have a responsibility to help people, to be a servant leader, to do all of these things, and if I see a problem, to stand up for it. The question is, how do you make it sustainable? Right. First of all, how many hours do you work every week? That's one of the questions that I always love to ask people. Yep. How many of it do you consider to be work? And also, how do you do it in a sustainable way?
Yeah. So I probably put in about 80 hours a week, but it doesn't feel like work. That's the best part, right? Okay. I've got the magic. No, and to that point, I mean, what you shared with regards to, the whole concept and idea of this, you're striving towards something, and, how do you not, again, it's a mindset. Because think of it this way, Nick. I mean, if I'm having 3 to 8 conversations with people a week to help them in life and career, people said, do you ever feel burnt out? Do you ever feel like it's been too much? And I said, no. See, if my life was a giant bucket and every single person I interact with is a smaller bucket and I'm pouring my contents and myself into their buckets, what's happening to my bucket? Well, it's depleting, right?
Yeah.
So that's what happens. People feel like a bucket. But my mindset is, I'm not a bucket. I'm a lit candle with a room full of unlit candles. And when you and I meet and our wicks touch, a giant flame emerges. And then as I pull away from Nick, my flame is no less depleted. And now you've lit another person up. And then my goal is to light up a room. When I did that shift in mindset about, not being a bucket, but rather a candle. Now, people would argue, yeah, but your candle's going to deplete too. I'm like, okay, you want to go on semantics, great, but I'm talking about the flame. The flame is not going to be depleted. So I think sometimes what we just need to really do is grasp at that mindset that we're going into, because my mindset says, no, I can carry on. I can do this. I'll teach a 4-hour lecture, have a 1-hour break, 4-hour lecture, get to an event for 3-4 hours, talk to people, help them. And then I come home and it's not tired. I'm jazzed. I'm energized, saying, what a great day I've had. I mean, again, the mindset I have is, and again, it may seem like a cliche, but I carry right next to me is an hourglass. So the interesting thing about an hourglass is it's a vessel of time.
Yeah.
Right? But it's also a vessel of what my life is. Because think of it this way, every grain of sand in this vessel represents a day of my life. Now, I can tell you that the day I wrote a blog post, I was 21,003 days old. If every grain represents a day of my life, there's 21,003 grains below me. All I know is every morning I wake up, a single grain enters this narrow chamber. And as it goes through my day of the people I meet, the situations I encounter, the experiences I have, by the end of the day, when I go to sleep, it drops below. We don't know how many grains are above us. 1, meaning, is today my last day? 500, 5,000, 15,000? We don't know how many are above us. All we know is how many are below us. But all I know is, I know that every single day, a single grain enters this narrow chamber. And I've told myself, I'm never going to waste a grain of sand. It's a choice. I'm never going to waste a grain of sand, because what if it's my last grain? Do I want to? And you go to a coffee shop, people will be sitting next to you, complaining about the weather, complaining about a person. What if this was your last grain of sand? Is that how you want to go out? I don't. So again, the candle versus the bucket, the hourglass, these are things that just keep me energized and keep me going. And there's no easing up on the gas pedal, because all of this guides me to my purpose.
Okay, so there's a lot there, and I really enjoyed all of that. So one thing that I do want to let you know, as a comment on the relationships and the candle flame bucket metaphor, at the moment I'm currently doing a research study, and it's better to be said that I'm part of a research study where I am a research assistant in a lab where we are asking ourselves that very question, actually. So have you ever heard of a fixed versus a growth mindset?
Yeah.
So a fixed mindset obviously is, let's talk about intelligence. So I say I have a 50 IQ, whatever. I'm not going to reveal my IQ. I have a 50 IQ, right? And I could grow my IQ, or I could keep my IQ the same. So a fixed mindset is saying I will never be able to grow my IQ. I will never be able to become more intelligent. And the growth mindset is saying I will always be able to grow and become more intelligent and learn. And if you're interested in that, you should read the book Mindset by Carol Dweck. Really, really incredible book. A lot of, the data really supports the growth mindset. Like there's no data that supports the fixed mindset. And, that's the truth of it. So now we're asking ourselves the same question in terms of relationships. We're saying, Well, how do you feel about relationships? Do you feel like if you were to gain another relationship, then you have to pull back on your other relationships? Do you feel like you have this sort of fixed amount of energy, motivation, relationship bandwidth, let's say, as it comes to helping people and growing and being social and all these things? Or do you feel like one person, one flame, let's say, is, igniting and gives you more energy, or you can maintain your same level while adding on the next social relationship? And we hypothesize, and we're not sure, we haven't done the study yet, and I can let you know, but we hypothesize that there are two mindsets, and your mindset, the mindset of the flame as opposed to the bucket, is the best answer. So
totally. And the idea behind it is every single conversation I have has a purpose and a meaning. We may not identify it right at the outset, but the idea is it's a relationship. And a relationship, once established, it doesn't matter how much time goes by, you can pick up where you left off. I mean, just 2 weeks ago, a person I hadn't talked to in probably 20 years, I did a podcast for someone else, and she saw my name on LinkedIn, and she was like, oh my God, that's the same guy I know.
Yeah.
And she sent me a note, and 20 years later, we finally met. And we just picked up where we left off. But that's the value of this, is the fact that it's not the fixed mindset or the growth mindset. It's also the capacity of the individual. And, maybe mine is hyper overloaded, that I can have all these conversations and build these relationships and meaningful, purposeful relationships. But that's because the candle was lit, and that flame is still lit on those people that I've interacted and talked to. And maybe on my last day on earth, maybe there's a huge bonfire at the end of it all.
Well, one of the things that I find really interesting is that in as we're talking about relationships, it seems as if many people that I know, and I could say me to some degree, struggle to just open up this flame. A big part about the flame is that, okay, to have this flame, you need to let go of fear, anxiety, fear of social consequence, all of these things. And you need to open yourself up to love and all of these mythical concepts that nobody really understands, yet whenever we socialize, we just intuitively understand them. How do you do it?
I think the main thing is your sense and purpose, I don't know if you want to call it your aura. I don't know what it is in that regard, but I just know that there's a level of comfort people find when they have a conversation with me. I've had people open up about suicide on the first conversation we've had, that they eventually share with that, or that they've had trouble conceiving children, and that this may happen. And this is right off the bat. I mean, that we're having our first conversation. I think what it is the fact that people will feel a sense of trust and comfort on the individual, and a level of, I can confide in you. Now, you can't do that with everybody. And it's almost like the universe says, I think the two of you need to meet because I think there's a purpose here. And next thing you know, that we're having these deep, meaningful conversations. So I think that that's the way that I would sort of hone in on it, is the fact that, when you talk to someone, you have a really good sense of that person. I think there's this subconscious part and this conscious part. The conscious part is the judging part, or you're wanting to respond back. But the subconscious part, I think, is actively working at the same time. And that's where the trust starts to build and establish based on how the interactions are and the talking and, that part. And then next thing you know, you're having this meaningful, heartfelt conversation, and you walk away from it going like, wow, like that was something that was impactful.
Yeah. And I think, it's really funny. So I see, I don't know if you got this vibe, or you kind of understand it, or if you've psychoanalyzed yourself in it to a degree, but I sort of see you as this, Star Wars 4. Have you ever seen Star Wars?
Yep. Oh yeah.
I see you as a sage, right? And a sage is a very simple character. It's Obi-Wan Kenobi as Luke Skywalker is going to go on his journey. And, Luke finds himself unconscious, beat up by these characters. And Obi-Wan Kenobi just comes by and gives him advice and sort of guides him along his journey. And that is the archetype of the sage. And it seems like to be a sage, there are all these characters that come along, all of these characteristics that come along with it. And a lot of it is a humble sense of wisdom, right? And I get that vibe from you like a lot. Like, you have this sense of wisdom, and you seem like, another thing about the sage is that it's very difficult to differentiate between the sage and the ordinary man, because the humility of the sage is that they are essentially ordinary men just with a lot of wisdom from within. So, for example, I have a barber, and my barber is a sage. Like, he's without a doubt a sage, but he's a barber, how does that turn out? But it's just so obvious to me that he's a sage. And well, it seems like you give off this vibe, and that's what I'm getting.
Well, thank you for that. And the other one I've been called is an old soul. And It's interesting. I've met old souls, and it's not an age thing. I've met 9-year-olds who are old souls, like the way that they interact or engage. And, and it's interesting because when you interact and engage with another old soul, or somebody that resonates with it, like maybe they're an old soul, but not as old as this other one.
Yeah.
They're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm sitting in the presence of someone I can actually talk to who really understands what I'm saying. I can't do this with my friends. They just think I'm crazy. Yeah. But, in that. And I mean, Nick, the other thing I tell my students is, if I teach you the concepts from the textbook, that's knowledge. And knowledge is important. But knowledge is limiting. I need you to make this into wisdom. Wisdom is the application, and thinking of it from a different perspective, adding purpose and meaning to it. So I think it goes back to what you're saying.
Yeah.
Sorry?
I think, and grounding in an experience. Like,
oh, totally.
When you said that like hit, like it is, you are not a human if you just learn things. No. You're a human if you experience things, if you immerse.
And apply.
Yeah.
And apply it. So I get my students, and that's where I do a lot of storytelling in my classes about how these work and does it work? And let's look at it and peel the onion skin and see what's the matter with this, or is there something wrong with this?
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's so much, and I don't know how much you align yourself with the concept of Buddhism and the religion and the philosophy and all of these things. But as we've gone along here, you've really espoused a lot of Buddhist views, and they're beautiful views, right? Yeah. Like this idea of finding the extraordinary in the ordinary, grounding yourself in sort of in the beauty of this, we'll say, the place exactly where you are. This idea of the
hourglass.
Hourglass, yep. Like these are all Buddhist views, and they're so beautiful. And well. First of all, if you like this podcast, if you like what Sam's saying, definitely start to understand Buddhist views, because they're absolutely beautiful. But I mean, I love it. Yeah, it's awesome.
I think I'm going to have to don an orange saffron robe and go sit on a mountain and think more deeper about purpose of life and things like that.
Well, if you call yourself a monk, I mean, that's just the next step.
It is.
But anyways, this was a great conversation. So Sam Thiara, tell everybody where they can find you, what you have going on, and thank you.
Yeah. No, and Nick, I mean, I've got about 180 blog posts, all free for people to read, and it's on my website. So if they just do www.sam-thiara, my last name.com, you'll find the blog posts there. Also, if you want a beautiful journey through India to discover my ancestral roots, but also myself, and I talk a lot about that in this book, that's also available on my website. But I'm also on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, the usual places as well. What I always want to tell your audience as well is my signature tagline is what I live by, and it really provided me clarity. Everyone's life is an autobiography. Make yours worth reading. You're a living story. Your stories need to be told, but you need to capture your stories first.
Yeah. And I think that's beautiful. Like, there's something beautiful in our everyday experience. There's something beautiful in the fact that we are sitting here as humans. And man, Thank you, Sam Thiara. This was wonderful.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Nick Lugo Show. Always make sure to check out the sponsors in the description below and to like, subscribe, and give 5 stars and in whatever way you can, because, well, I hope to spread this podcast and these episodes with more people, and you could help me do that. I always love to end my podcast with one quote, and this quote is my favorite of all time. It's by Viktor Frankl in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. Ever more people today have the means to live, but no meaning to live for. Think about that quote, and, well, have a good day.